Welcome to Surgeon Syndicate. If you're paying attention, you know that you only make money when you work. It might be great money, but it's dependent on you. The information on this podcast will help you solve that. We interview experts and provide analysis into financial freedom through commercial real estate. Why? To help physicians like you thrive. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Surgeon Syndicate. This is your host, Dr. Michael McManus, and we are back now for the second half of our discussion with Alex Schloe. Alex, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me back. Really excited to dive deep into assisted living and some of the cool things we're doing in that space.
All right. If you missed the first episode with Alex, please go back and listen to it. It is full of gold. I'm not going to go back through his whole bio here because I wanted to jump in what we're doing. So I'll just give you the abbreviated. Alex is an Air Force physician. He's been an entrepreneur his whole life. And he's made some great progress in real estate investing, which has given him some great financial freedom. So please go back and listen to that episode. But now we're going to dive into assisted living because this is an asset class that, being a doctor, it's something that kind of sits there close to what we do. But I'll have to say, I don't know much about it. I actually had a broker right before we left Green Bay come to me with a portfolio of 3 assisted livings that he had developed, that the broker's partner had developed and run, but now they were looking to retire. And it turned out to be a bit too big of a project to bite off. But part of the big concern was I don't know how to run an assisted living. And I ended up, luckily I was able to hand it off to somebody out of my network. So I was able to connect to them and do some good in the world. So getting that deal done, but ended up to be nothing for me. So I'm excited to learn more about it and how that whole process works. So teach me something about assisted living.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. And again, thanks for having me back. The first episode was really fun to talk about like the foundation and what really matters to set you up for real estate investing success and get you on the journey towards financial freedom, and excited to jump into the nuts and bolts of residential assisted living. I'll just take a 30,000 foot view of what is residential assisted living, and we'll kind of dive a little bit deeper in to that and investment opportunities in regards to that. But a residential assisted living home, it's a smaller, more intimate setting or home-like environment where the residents receive care in a house. So typically these are large single-story homes that have been converted into residential assisted living homes. And typically they'll accommodate about 6 to 16 residents or so, depending on the state and zoning and regulations and so forth, but about 6 to 16. The beautiful part about residential assisted living is that these homes offer a way more personalized approach, a higher caregiver to resident ratio in that home-like atmosphere. So it really makes it feel like you're more in a private residence than in this like big box facility where we're all familiar and have probably rotated in as physicians that smell like urine, patients have pressure ulcers, and there's caregivers running around taking care of 30 residents. This is not that in any way. And so that's what a residential assisted living home looks like. It's a complete contrast to that large big box assisted living facility that we're familiar with, and it's an incredible asset class. If we want to, we diving into kind of the demographics might be helpful. So right now, it's projected we're about 1 million assisted living beds short in the United States. In different sources that you read, that may be 1.3 million, and they're projecting that to be at least 1.3 million by 2029. The reason behind that is there's 77 million baby boomers in the United States, and 7 out of 10 of them are going to require long-term care. So you're looking at 59 million baby boomers who are going to require long-term care. And about 80% of the residents who are in assisted living homes right now are part of the silent generation, meaning, older than the baby boomers. And so the baby boomer generation hasn't even started really filtering into these assisted living homes yet. So there's going to be a huge, silver tsunami, a huge crisis where the supply demand mismatch is going to be enormous. And so I really believe that assisted living is the best asset class in real estate right now. And more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Oh, I just learned something because even though we had talked about residential assisted living, I was thinking of a bigger facility. And I guess I've seen some of these smaller facilities, but didn't really understand that difference. And it makes a lot of sense now. And you think about, yeah, I'd rather live in a smaller home with like 10 other people than in a facility with 100.
Mhm.
So that's awesome. I feel smarter now. But so right now, there's already a shortage of 1 million beds. We have, and like I said, the baby boomers aren't really assisted living age yet anyway. So this isn't, so the current shortage is not a baby boomer effect. It's just a shortage, probably an effect of people just living longer than they used
Mhm.
to and being
Exactly.
sicker for longer periods of time. So the real demand wave is yet to come.
Yeah, I think so. I really do believe, and the beauty of that too is that demand is going to exist for the next couple decades. I mean, this isn't something that's like, oh well, baby boomers are now turning 75, and we have this brief rush. Like this is going to be something that we're seeing more and more of these baby boomers age in over time, and more of these are going to be needed over time. And certainly more of these big box facilities are going to be needed too, and that may be a way to increase the number of residents that are being taken care of. But we're really focused on how can we provide the best care possible in a more cost effective model too. It's significantly cheaper, although it is expensive, but it's significantly cheaper to live in a residential assisted living home than it is in one of these big box facilities, or to have like an in-home nurse aide who's doing 24/7 care. And the big distinction for residential assisted living is this is not typically significant medical care that's being provided. This is help with their activities of daily living. So it just kind of extends that range of independence for a little bit longer for folks and gets them in that home-like, community-like environment where folks tend to excel. We really saw that with COVID too. I didn't own any assisted living facilities at the time, but if you look, back at the big box assisted living facilities, some of them were decimated by COVID, and the smaller residential assisted living homes did a bit better, and the residents felt safer in those homes. So I think that the pivot is going to shift more towards, hey, we want to be in a residential assisted living home. We want mom or dad or grandma or grandpa to have that home-like environment, that high caregiver ratio. I agree. My partners, Charlie, Luke, and I are talking about like, hey, we need to keep one of these for ourselves when, when we're old enough, so we can just all ride off into the sunset together. But anyway, so it's amazing.
Well, it sounds like also because so many people, and my wife's family was just dealing with this, that as people age, they're like, I want to stay in my house. How many times do you hear that? And you probably, especially in family practice,
Yeah,
I guess your population might be younger than
we
in
get some
general being in the Air
retirees,
Force.
but yeah,
Do
yeah,
you? Oh, so you do.
yeah,
So you hear it then that I want to stay in my home. I want to stay in my home. It's like this theme that people don't want to go to a nursing because that's what they
yeah,
see. I go from living in my home to going to a nursing home. And then one of the big challenges, and again, you're going to be a bigger expert in this, is social isolation. So they can't, you can't drive, or they're just scared to drive. And all these things that start, the weather's bad, I don't want to walk. All these things that keep, as people age, keep them in their house. And so now their house almost becomes like a jail cell,
mhm,
and they have that social isolation. The number of times I find it extends your doctor visits because they got out of the house and they want to talk for
yeah,
forever
yeah,
because this is their social
right,
excursion.
yeah,
And so if people have a different view of this and a different opportunity, that actually, guess what? This is better than your house. You don't have to take care of the whole house.
mhm,
You've got help taking care of it, and you have friends.
yeah,
it
yeah.
it's a great in between.
Right. Yeah. Community, friends, good food, social activities, transportation. I mean, yeah, it sounds great. I'm honestly ready to sign up. But yeah, I agree. And I think that physicians, like, we have such a unique opportunity to, like, we understand where these folks are and kind of meet them where they are. And we have, in our mastermind that we have, the row room, we have a bunch of doctors in there, and I think they just we see the bad outcomes that can happen in some of these nursing homes, or we take care of elderly patients and we see like, hey, there's got to be something more than what the status quo is right now. And so that's why I think physicians are really drawn to this space as well. Another question we get all the time, though, is the operation side of things or the liability side of things. And I think super important for us to hit on that. And there's kind of multiple different ways you can invest in a residential assisted living home. You can own the real estate, own the operation. So you're involved in the day-to-day care, you're taking care of the residents, you're doing the transportation, cooking meals, all those sorts of things. So owning the real estate and the operations. You can own the real estate and lease that out to an operator who does all the day-to-day care, which is what we do for 5 of our homes. We own them and we lease them out to an operator, and they cash flow about $3,000 to $5,000 per month per home. So cash flow more than a short-term rental with less work once you find a good operator. And we can talk a little bit more about that. And then you can just lease the business out. So you can do the operations and lease a house from us, for example. So those are 3 ways. And of course, you can invest passively in some of these other deals. But we decided, my partners, one is active duty naval officer, and one was in the Air Force and just recently separated, so he could walk his daughter to school every day, which is amazing. And we decided, like, hey, we don't have the time or the bandwidth to own and operate these homes. And 5 of ours the 5 that we leased to operate are in Arizona, which none of us are. And so that's kind of how we went down that path. And in terms of the liability from that perspective, the home operator is required to have extensive liability insurance, and we're on their liability insurance as well. So we're also covered from that perspective. And then we have to provide home insurance for the physical property itself. And so that's kind of how the liability piece works. We're not involved at all with the care, the placement of residents, getting the home licensed, any of that. We just provide the home that can be licensed or was previously licensed, find the operator, which is your linchpin, most important piece, sign a commercial lease. They're responsible for everything but mortgage, taxes, insurance, and like the roof, which property insurance would cover. And then they pay us a lease fee that typically has a 3% or so annual increase each year. So it's kind of a commercial, like, double net lease, not full triple net, because we're still paying taxes. But it's a really great opportunity to get into the assisted living space and the benefits without having to do the operations piece.
So when you look at the liability, I'm just assuming that your business setup is that you don't personally own the building; it's owned through an entity.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a separation. If there were any liability that flowed through the operator, it would be to your ownership entity and not to you personally. So
Right.
your other assets aren't affected.
Right.
And probably each one of these is in its own entity. So there's no cross contamination. If you did have a problem in one, it doesn't affect the other ones.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, we have each house is its own entity, its own LLC that then is owned by a holding LLC that is then owned by all 3 of us and our separate holding LLCs. So there's a lot of layers, and it's important, especially as physicians, to think about, how can you eliminate as much risk as possible, and that's the way that we were told to do it. But yeah, a lot of the risk is on the operators, or predominantly all the risk is on the operators, because we're not attached or any way affiliated really with the day-to-day care that happens from that perspective.
So if somebody came in as a passive investor, and we'll talk about that there, and I'll just let you speak to it. What kind of risk do they have?
Yeah. I mean, it would be even less, because typically if you're a passive investor, there's still a whole other step of your entity owns part of our entity that owns part of that home that then is held by another entity. So it's kind of a web. It gets really confusing. I feel like we need to have the old like picture with the red line back here that shows. But minimal risk from that perspective, just because there's just so many degrees of separation from the care that's being provided to the investment.
So to them,
great
like,
question.
I guess like any real estate investment, if you're invested as a limited partner or a passive investor, if this is set up right, then that's something to learn how to make sure the structure is right. But you have no personal liability to anything that goes on in it. Your only risk is the money you put in.
Yeah.
So there's always a risk to the capital you put in. That's any deal.
Right.
But your biggest risk there as an investor is business plan execution.
Mhm.
If you, as the owner of the building and the one who's going to lease it out, how good is your operator that you're leasing to? How reliable are they? How is that structured?
Yeah, that's the biggest risk from the lease to operator model is your operator. Your operator is the linchpin. You have to make sure you really vet your operator well, that they have experience, that they have reserves, that they're motivated to run an assisted living home for the right reason, because it is hard work. I mean, it is very hard work, as we all probably have some experience taking care of elderly. It's difficult, and the cash flow is incredible, don't get me wrong, but the work is hard. And so finding the right operator is the linchpin, from that perspective. Now, I will say for us, we've raised capital in two different ways. We have raised capital for a couple homes that were leased to operator model, and that was just essentially a promissory note, 10% simple interest, 5 to 7 year hold. And these were folks who were like, hey, I have a bunch of money in my self-directed IRA that I just want a better return on. They don't get any equity in the home. There's even another degree of separation from liability. They're just getting that 10% simple interest, that mailbox money.
They're basically the
It,
bank,
they're the bank,
because
yeah,
what
for
you're
the
you're
down
taking
payment,
a
yeah,
loan.
or
You're
exactly,
giving them a loan, so they're
yep.
operating like a bank.
Yep. Yep. They're the bank, but they're getting a way higher return than they would get otherwise. And some exposure, but significantly passive, just mailbox money. And then we started apparently what is the first residential assisted living fund, which is crazy and super exciting. And so we've raised for 3 homes in that as of right now, partnered with an amazing operator from that we met through a Facebook community we started. In that Facebook community. We started that last November, I think it was, maybe December, and there's like 11,500 people in there. It's been nuts. We started it just to try and find more operators, more realtors, and more deal flow, and then it just exploded. It's been amazing, and that kind of led to creating the mastermind. But so we partnered with an operator, Brandon Schwab, and he's got a bunch of experience owning and operating these homes. He's got 141 beds, more probably by the time this airs, and is just amazing. And so we raised capital for the renovations. Essentially, we're doing like a Burr row where he's buying these, and we're rehabbing them and renting them out, increasing the resident rates, because they're commercial properties, so they're valued based off cap rates and NOI, and so you can significantly increase the value for these assisted living homes. And so we raised those in a fund, and so we essentially have some equity in the deal and a promissory note, and raised it that way. So those deal opportunities, folks have access to equity and depreciation and appreciation, and then the big payoff is going to be when we reposition these after they're refinanced and we have it full with residents who are paying private pay. The homes that we purchased at 1.5 million are probably going to be worth close to 3.5 or 4 million based off cap rates. So it's an amazing opportunity, certainly. And so it's been just super fun journey.
Since you were talking about your operator, are the operators who do these, do they tend to also run big assisted living, or do they just run multiple residential ones?
A lot of what we're seeing is either they previously worked in a big assisted living facility and they did not like the environment or how many residents they had to take care of, or they were a caregiver and now they want to get into the operation space and own their own business. That's where a lot of them are coming from. We also see a ton of burnt out nurses, or burnt out providers who want to get into this space and operate as well. So healthcare workers, I mean, it just really works out great to kind of cross over from being a nurse who's burnt out working on the floor to now owning and operating your assisted living home. And so we see a lot of it there. And then Brandon, he actually doesn't, he was just inspired over time. He's been doing this for about a decade after his grandpa had a really poor experience in a nursing home. He was like, hey, there's got to be a better way to do this. And that's how he found residential assisted living and got into it that way. So no healthcare background at all. So a wide mix, but the majority have either some affiliation with healthcare or some affiliation with working in a big box assisted living facility.
But the operators themselves are just operating residential ones. They're not doing big
Oh,
box and residential.
yeah. Great question.
Yeah.
Sorry, I misunderstood that. Yeah.
No, that's okay. It was a great explanation.
Yeah. Typically they're operating just residential assisted living. Oftentimes you want to kind of think about the end in mind and economies of scale. So if you're thinking, hey, I really want to get into the operation space and to like kind of preface, like I know folks who own these and operate these homes and they're making $10,000 to $20,000 per month in cash flow once because they own the real estate, they own the operations, and once it's fully leased out to residents, they're making 10 to $20,000 per month in cash flow. So one house can provide financial freedom for a large number of folks. But the hard part is do you want to work in the business or on the business, especially as a physician or a high W-2 earner who is still wanting to do their job? It would be very hard to also operate an assisted living home. So oftentimes folks will hire a manager for say $5,000 or so a month, who is like the CEO of that house and does all the scheduling and hiring and the day to day. So it's almost like leasing out to an operator, but you're still getting the benefits of owning that operation. And that works out great. But oftentimes those managers can manage more than one home. So then you can use economies of scale and have one manager that you're paying $60,000, $70,000 per year to manage 2 homes or 3 homes. And if they're close by to each other, then the caregivers can split shifts amongst the different homes, so they're staying full time. So you're really able to split those costs as well. And so that's a way to think about it. And we're working right now on how to pivot to that, how to just Charlie, Luke, and I in our company to own the real estate, own the operations instead of just a small piece of it in the fund. How we can own our own, because like I said, just 1 or 2 of these can be a huge game changer.
When you look at a lot of care facilities, sorry, the one of the challenges that they all seem to have is hiring, because it's not a great job. It's like the Happy Gilmore, that
Ben Stiller's coming in. Yeah.
that's right. So with this smaller environment, is it easier to hire workers because it's a better place to work too, a better work environment?
Yeah. Often it is, because you're, instead of taking care of 20 people, you're taking care of 5, or maybe 10 if you're overnight. Typically folks will have 2 or so caregivers during the day and 1 at night, depending on how many residents you have. So you're looking at a 1 to 5 caregiver ratio if you have 10 residents, or 1 to 10 at night, where things are typically more quiet. So there's increased job satisfaction, community with that. The harder part with caregivers, 1, it's a hard job, as you mentioned. 2, you can go flip burgers at Whataburger and probably make about as much money. And then 3, it's a little bit harder from a benefits perspective to offer than one of these big box facilities. And so it can be hard to retain folks. You have to be willing to pay more and help them out and be willing to work with them, because if you find a good caregiver, or if you're in the manager scenario, you find a great manager, you got to figure out how to retain them, because it's hard to find good people. But yeah, long-winded answer to say typically folks at least enjoy the experience of a residential assisted living home more than working in the big box.
That's interesting, because there's a lot of unhappy healthcare workers. And, in our old practice, I still remember this day that we'd hired a new front desk person, and she'd been there for like 3 days, and she's just smiles. And, I don't want to work at the front desk in a medical office. She's all smiles and happy. And one day she says, "Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to work here." I'm like, "Whoa, why?" I'm like, "What? Why is it so great?" Because I knew she'd come. We'd hired her from another doctor's office in another system. And she goes, "Man, you guys are just so great to work for." And I'm thinking, business hat on. I'm like, "Wow, what is it that's so great about working here?" She goes, "You don't yell at me."
Oh.
And I remember looking at our manager, and I'm like, "Wow, man, the bar is low. You want to be the best employer in town. The bar is low." So I wonder, from that standpoint, that really it's hard work, but there's a lot of burnout nurses. There's a lot of burnout CNAs. There's a lot of bad places to work as a healthcare provider, and probably with a little bit of ingenuity and not a lot of really hard work, that most people quit. It's not so much about the money. It's not that they want the highest wage. They always say that. There's a great survey where they looked at like, it's like 80% of people, or maybe more, when they leave a job, when they resign, will tell HR on their exit that they quit because they're getting more money. But on outside surveys, why did you leave your job? It's only like 20% say it was because of more money. And the reason that they came up, I saw a couple articles about this and I found it fascinating, is that by the time people quit for another reason, it's because they've already brought the problems forward. They've already been like, this is a problem, this is a problem, nothing gets fixed. And so by the time they get surveyed when they quit, they're like, why are you quitting? And you're like, I've already told you all the reasons I'm quitting. Who cares? So you're trying to give an answer that won't get any pushback and give any more dumb questions, because you just want to leave at that point.
Yeah.
So you're like, you don't pay enough. I got paid more. And you're like, how much more?
Yeah.
50% more, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me get out of here. So that's it. I just wonder, like in this market, if you guys are looking at doing that probably you find the pain points of why they don't like to work in the other place. And just we always just aimed to pay in like the 70th percentile, the high end of average, and make it a better place to work. And it was amazing.
Culture. Yeah. The culture is everything. And and then think about, I guess folks' argument would be like, oh, well, if you're paying more, it's going to cost more, you're going to have less cash flow or whatever it may be. But think about like the time saved, if you find someone who's really good at their job, and the time saved from not having to train somebody else and waste a couple more months. And, and so there's a lot of opportunity costs that are there with getting the right people on the bus or right people on the job than if you just, I'm going to try and penny pinch and pay the least amount of money and expect that it's just going to work out.
Yeah, a lot of hospitals have missed that boat, looking at the training costs of bringing on new nurses and doctors, and they just got this revolving door. And you're like, don't you guys get it? Anyway.
Yeah, don't get me on that tangent of like, the medical world. Everyone here is like, amen.
I know, I just pushed a button. A bunch of people's blood pressure just went up. So I apologize. Go do your meditation afterwards and let that go, man. That's all you need, real estate. So when the time comes, you can let it out. You can really let it go.
Yeah.
Well, this is awesome. So what else? Are there any last points you'd like to make about, this asset class and what you guys are doing? Because it sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I think there's a huge opportunity, and one thing I didn't mention too as well. I mentioned the silver tsunami in the setting of residential assisted living homes, but we're also seeing that silver tsunami in mom and pop businesses, and a lot of these residential assisted living homes are owned by mom and pop who are ready to retire. And so there's a lot of different ways to think creatively about how could I potentially figure out or find these assisted living homes that have distressed sellers or have folks who want to retire. And maybe you can create a seller finance situation with way better lending terms, or get into a deal you otherwise couldn't. And so that's where we've been working as well, is finding some seller finance opportunities. We just closed on one probably 3-4 months ago that we sent some direct mail to, and we were able to get a mom and pop operator, and they wanted seller financing. We ended up paying 6% down for the down payment instead of 25 or 30. And, that just wouldn't happen otherwise. And so opportunities are out there. You just have to get creative or get in the right room with folks who've done it before.
Yeah, and the seller financing is because a lot of people don't get this. If somebody hasn't been listening and they've never talked about seller financing, if somebody's selling a business, this has been their livelihood. This is the money coming in. And when they do a seller finance deal, what that means is now they're collecting interest from you, and they continue a revenue stream off of their old business. And they would rather be invested in this business than go put it somewhere else, because they know it's a good business. And that's really what they're doing. They're becoming an investor. They're loaning you the money by doing the seller financing. So a lot of seller financing, when you get somebody who's looking to retire, to them is often a great deal. And often some of them don't even think about it. Mm-hmm. And I have a buddy, he closed a deal. They couldn't come to price. And what about seller financing? I don't want to do any seller financing. He was like, well, how would you like to get in $10,000 a month on this for the next 20 years? He's like, what? That's almost what I make now.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all of a sudden the seller financing, the guy had no idea. And it turned into this like, man, when they closed on the deal, he left all smiles like, wow, I sold my business. I don't have to work in it anymore. And it
Yeah.
still pays me. This
Yeah.
is awesome.
It's an amazing opportunity, you know, when you think about it. And seller financing gives you the power to negotiate in a lot of different ways. It's not just the down payment. You can negotiate the interest rate or amortization or a balloon payment. I mean, there's so many different ways to structure it. And you can typically think about it as like, hey, I'll pay your price on my terms, or you'll pay, or I'll pay my price on your terms. And there's a lot more negotiation there. But really, it just comes down to the opportunity. Like, this was a huge win-win for both parties, right? We got in this incredible deal with less money down and better terms. Our interest rate was 6%, which at the time it was 8.5. And so it was just a win-win for everybody. And that wouldn't have come up if we didn't hop on the phone with them, talk with them, and figure out, hey, what do they want? And they mentioned retirement. And then we have, you know, a sheet that we drew up that we send to anyone who want to talk about seller financing. That's like, look, you're saving this much money in commissions to the realtor and this much money in whatever other fees. And also look how much money in interest you're getting over this time period. And once they see that number, that typically opens the door, as you mentioned, to like, hey, this seems like a great idea. And so it's a good way to do it, and you know, kind of eliminate some hurdles of having to go through the bank and you know, play by their rules specifically. So it's yeah, it's an awesome opportunity.
I love that. You must have read the book, Never Split the Difference by
Oh
Chris
yeah.
Voss.
Yeah.
So if anybody listening hasn't read this, especially if you look at negotiating as this horrible thing, because basically what the book, I'll give you the really quick version, is that a lot of the time we look at negotiating that it's all just based on one thing. It's based on price. They want the most money. The seller wants the most money. The buyer wants the least money. And usually though, coming into it, there are actually other things we want. And when you ask the question is, what do you want to get out of this deal? You often find out that it's not just the highest price. It may be a quick close, so they have the cash to go do something. It may be to retire. And you find out their concern is, okay, I can't work anymore, but once I quit, how am I going to have income? And all of a sudden you're in an opportunity to solve their problem and solve your problem at the same time, where everybody gets what they want. And it's not that one person has to get more or less. It's just finding the structure that everybody gets what they want. It's And if you haven't read that book and you're looking at doing real estate, you need to read it. And it'll help you in all forms of life, of just understanding most negotiations aren't what you think they're about until
Yeah.
you dig into it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll never forget. He always just says, well, how do you expect me to do that? And just sits there in silence, you know, Chris Voss. And so it's just really funny how that one question can just change everything. But anyways, yeah, it's a great opportunity. That's an amazing book by Chris Voss. Yeah. Definitely read that. And there's just, you know, hopefully folks will take away from this podcast episode that there's just a lot of opportunity in a lot of different ways in residential assisted living. And we've only talked about the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there's memory care homes, there's ventilator homes, there's a lot more than just residential assisted living for your activities of daily living. And so we could certainly talk about that at some point too, Mike, if folks are interested. But it's a great opportunity to provide high quality care in an environment that our seniors deserve. And it's just awesome. Like, it just really boils down to that.
That's awesome. Well, let's plan on having you back and we can talk about all these other avenues of
Yeah.
residential assisted living, because it sounds like we said, we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. So maybe we can dive under the water and see the rest another time. That'd be great if you'll come back.
Oh, absolutely. Would love to. Thanks, Mike.
Awesome. Well, if somebody wants to get a hold of you and learn more about what you do or wants to invest with you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. I need to like just make one website that has everything. But if folks are interested in learning more about assisted living, we have a free 10-step guide on openrangeinvesting.com, or just send me a message or something like that. We'll send that out to you. And then the mastermind is the RAW room, the residential assisted living room. It's a assisted living mastermind where we take you soup to nuts for cheap, for the price of a course, but also give you the community, the accountability, expert insights. We're bringing operators, lenders, caregivers. We just had a guy come talk about fire suppression systems, like everything that you're going to need in a community of folks who are going to encourage you to buy your first or next residential assisted living home. So therowroom.com for that. And then Alex Schloe, you can find me wherever, our Physicians and Properties. You can find that wherever as well. But yeah, I appreciate it. I need to just come up with one link and go from there, but appreciate the opportunity, Mike.
You're welcome. So we'll have all those in the show notes. You can go to surgeonsyndicate.com and find all those connections to get a hold of Alex. Alex, thank you for being here. This has been awesome. For all our listeners, thank you for giving us your time, and I hope we've provided the value for your valuable time. And join us another time on Surgeon Syndicate.
Do you care about paying too much in taxes? And would you like to save more of your hard-earned dollars? Here's what we found. We found that most financial professionals have a one-size-fits-all solution. So the question is, would it make it easier for you to have someone tailor your tax solutions to your individual needs so you can keep more of your money and do what you want with it? That is exactly what we do at Excelstra.
As surgeons, we know the difference between routine surgery versus life-threatening interventions. And I want you to know that I've used Unicia and her team for my personal financial intervention, and I love the results. I would do you a disservice if I didn't recommend them to you.
We'd love to help you, so let's jump on a call and see how we can collaborate. Simply go to www.excelstra.com/McManus and book your free call today.
This has been an episode of Surgeon Syndicate. If you got value from this episode, you know other surgeons are hungry to become job optional, and you can help them by sharing this content today. Schedule a call and we can make a plan. Looking forward to having you with me on the next episode.